You wake up, check your phone, and it's 10 a.m. You look outside and it's pitch black. Not cloudy. Not overcast. Black. Like someone switched off the sun itself. Now imagine that darkness doesn't lift at noon, or at 2 p.m., or ever, for 6 straight months. This isn't some dystopian nightmare. This is the reality for 3,500 people living in Rjukan, Norway, and what they did to fight back against this darkness. It's so audacious, so brilliantly insane that it sounds like something straight out of a Marvel movie. They literally stole sunlight from the sky. The valley that time forgot. Nestled deep in the heart of Norway's Telemark region, Rjukan sits at the bottom of a valley, so steep, so impossibly narrow, that for half the year, from September to March, the surrounding mountains completely block every single ray of direct sunlight from reaching the town center. Think about that for a moment. 6 months, 180 days, without feeling actual sunlight on your face. The town was built in 1905 by industrialist Sam Ide, who chose this location specifically because of the massive waterfalls that could power his nitrogen factories. But here's the cruel irony. The very geography that made Rjukan perfect for industry made it a kind of beautiful prison for its residents. Now you might be thinking, come on, how bad could it really be? Well, let me paint you a picture that'll make you never complain about a cloudy day again. Imagine dropping your kids off at school in complete darkness. Imagine coming home from work in complete darkness. Imagine that your vitamin D levels plummet so drastically that seasonal depression becomes not just common, but practically universal. According to research published in the Journal of Environmental Psychology, residents of areas with extreme seasonal light variation show significantly higher rates of seasonal affective disorder, sometimes affecting up to 25% of the population in the most extreme cases. But here's where the story gets interesting. Because the people of Rjukan? They weren't about to just accept their fate. The impossible dream. For over a century, the residents of Rjukan lived with this reality. Mothers would bundle up their babies and make pilgrimages up the mountainside just so their children could feel sunlight. People would drive 30 minutes out of town during lunch breaks, desperately chasing those precious rays like botanical creatures seeking photosynthesis. But in 2005, everything changed when a local artist named Martin Anderson had an idea so crazy, so seemingly impossible, that most people laughed it off. What if they could bring the sun to them? Anderson wasn't talking about some metaphorical sun. He wasn't talking about artificial lights or therapy lamps. He was talking about actual, honest-to-goodness sunlight. Redirected, reflected, stolen from the sky above, and beamed down into their dark valley like some kind of ancient solar weapon. The concept was called Solspeil, literally sun mirror in Norwegian. Now here's where most crazy ideas die, in the cold, harsh light of physics and budgets. But Anderson wasn't deterred. He spent years researching, calculating, obsessing over the mathematics of reflection angles and the seasonal movement of the sun. According to documentation from the Rjukan Municipal Council, he presented detailed proposals showing how 3 massive mirrors, each measuring 17 square meters, that's about 183 square feet, could be positioned on the mountainside to track the sun's movement and redirect its light down into the town square. But here's the thing about impossible ideas. They stay impossible until someone makes them possible. The Herculean engineering challenge. The engineering challenges were absolutely mind-boggling. We're not talking about setting up a bathroom mirror here. These mirrors needed to be positioned 450 meters above the town. That's nearly 1,500 feet up a near vertical mountainside. They needed to withstand hurricane-force winds, sub-zero temperatures, and the constant freeze-thaw cycles that would destroy most equipment within months. But the real genius? These mirrors needed to move. Not just sit there like static reflectors, but actively track the sun throughout the day, constantly adjusting their angles to maintain perfect reflection down into the town square. According to engineering reports from the installation team, each mirror is controlled by sophisticated computer systems that calculate the sun's position every few seconds and adjust accordingly, essentially creating a massive, mountain-mounted sundial that works in reverse. The project required helicopter installations, custom-built weather-resistant housings, and a control system, so precise that it could maintain focus on a target area just 600 square meters from nearly half a kilometer away. To put that in perspective, imagine trying to shine a flashlight from the top of the Empire State Building onto a specific basketball court, while both you and the target are moving. The opposition, when reality fights back. But not everyone was convinced this was a good idea. Critics emerged from multiple fronts, each raising legitimate concerns that threatened to kill the project before it ever began. Environmental scientists questioned whether redirecting natural sunlight patterns could disrupt local ecosystems. Some worried about the psychological effects. Would artificial sunlight actually help, or would the knowledge that it was fake somehow make it less beneficial? Dr. Russell Reiter, a leading researcher in light therapy from the University of Texas Health Science Center, has published extensively on how the human circadian system responds to different types and intensities of light exposure. Then there were the practical concerns. Weather experts pointed out that Norway's notorious cloud cover meant the mirrors would be useless for significant portions of even the sunny season. Financial analysts questioned whether spending millions on what essentially amounted to a giant mood light was the best use of municipal resources. Local business owners worried about tourism implications. Would people still visit their unique dark town if it was no longer authentically dark? Some residents even argued that the darkness was part of their identity, their hardiness, their Norwegian resilience. These weren't frivolous concerns. This was a community grappling with whether to fundamentally alter something that had defined them for over a century. Was bringing artificial sunlight worth potentially losing their authentic character? The Miracle Day, October 30, 2013. But on October 30, 2013, all the debates, all the engineering challenges, all the skepticism came down to a single moment. As hundreds of residents gathered in the town square, holding their breath in the familiar darkness they'd known their entire lives, 3 massive mirrors high above began their mechanical dance. Slowly, almost imperceptibly at first, they tilted and adjusted, searching for that perfect angle. And then, light. Not the harsh artificial glow of street lamps or the cold blue of LED panels. Actual, warm, golden sunlight, the same photons that had left the sun 8 minutes earlier now bouncing off engineered mirrors and cascading down into a valley that had been dark since September. According to eyewitness accounts documented by Norwegian Broadcasting Corporation (NRK), grown adults cried. Children who had never felt natural sunlight in their town square ran laughing into the illuminated area. People called family members, describing the surreal experience of standing in sunlight while surrounded by the deep shadows that had defined their home. The mirrors created a patch of light roughly 600 square meters, about the size of a large parking lot. Not huge, but large enough for dozens of people to gather, to sit on benches, to feel that ancient warmth on their faces that humans have treasured since the dawn of civilization. What have we really accomplished? But here's where the story gets really interesting, because the Solspeil project raises questions that go far beyond engineering or even quality of life. This is fundamentally about humanity's relationship with nature itself. Think about it. For the first time in human history, a community looked at one of nature's most fundamental constraints and said, no, we refuse to accept this. They didn't move. They didn't adapt. They changed the very flow of sunlight itself to suit their needs. Is this incredible human ingenuity, or is it hubris? Are we witnessing the ultimate triumph of technology over natural limitation? Or are we seeing the beginning of a dangerous precedent where humans refuse to live within natural boundaries? Some philosophers argue that our willingness to accept natural constraints, like seasonal darkness, is part of what makes us human. That struggle, that adaptation, that acceptance of forces beyond our control shapes our character, our resilience, our appreciation for what we have. But others counter that this is exactly what human intelligence evolved for, to overcome limitations, to improve our circumstances, to refuse to be passive victims of geography or climate or circumstance. The ripple effects, a world transform. The success of Rjukan Solspeil has sent shockwaves through communities facing similar challenges worldwide. Towns in Alaska, northern Canada, and Siberia are now seriously investigating their own mirror systems. Urban planners are exploring how reflected sunlight could illuminate shadowed courtyards in dense cities. Architects are incorporating light redirection into building designs. But perhaps most intriguingly, space agencies are studying the Rjukan project as a potential model for future extraterrestrial colonies. If we can redirect sunlight in a Norwegian valley, could we do the same on Mars? Could we create artificial seasons on a space station? Could we terraform entire planets by controlling how sunlight reaches their surfaces? We're not just talking about mirrors anymore. We're talking about humanity's first real attempt to edit the basic conditions of life on Earth. The uncomfortable truth about progress. But let's be honest about something that supporters of the project don't like to discuss. The Solspeil, impressive as it is essentially a very expensive band-aid on a fundamental mismatch between human needs and geographic reality. Those mirrors work for maybe 4-5 hours on a good day, and only when it's not cloudy, snowing, or experiencing the mechanical failures that have periodically shut down the system. For most of the dark season, Rjukan is still, well, dark. Recent studies on the psychological impact, while limited, suggest that while residents appreciate the mirrors, the effect on seasonal depression and vitamin D deficiency has been more modest than initially hoped. Dr. Norman Rosenthal's research on light therapy, published in the Journal of Clinical Psychiatry, indicates that effective treatment typically requires much longer exposure to bright light than the mirrors can provide. So what does this mean? Are the mirrors a failure? Or are we measuring success by the wrong metrics entirely? The philosophy of borrowed light. Here's what I think makes the Rjukan story so fascinating. It's not really about the light at all. It's about hope. It's about refusing to accept limitations. It's about a community saying, we will not be defined by our circumstances. Think about the psychological impact of knowing that your community cared enough, fought hard enough, and dreamed big enough to literally move mountains and redirect sunlight for your well-being. Think about what it means to live in a place where people refuse to accept the impossible. The mirrors might only provide light for a few hours. They might not cure seasonal depression or solve vitamin D deficiency, but they prove something far more important. They prove that humans will never, ever stop fighting against the limitations that the universe tries to impose on us. And maybe that's the real light they're reflecting down into that valley. Not just photons from the sun, but something brighter, something that no amount of darkness can ever extinguish, the light of human determination itself. Questions that challenge everything. So here's what I want you to think about as you go about your day, complaining about cloudy weather or short winter days. What limitations in your own life have you accepted as unchangeable? What impossible problems are you living with simply because that's how things have always been? The people of Rjukan looked at 6 months of darkness and refused to accept it. They spent years planning, millions of dollars, and incredible effort to steal sunlight from the sky itself. What would happen if you approached your own limitations with that same, audacious refusal to accept the status quo? And here's the deeper question that keeps me awake at night, as we develop more power to change our natural environment, from redirecting sunlight to controlling weather to potentially terraforming other planets. What responsibility do we have to consider the unintended consequences? At what point does human ingenuity become human arrogance? Because the Solspeil project isn't just about a Norwegian town getting some extra sunlight. It's about the moment humanity decided that nature's rules are more like suggestions. And whether that's the most beautiful or most terrifying thing we've ever done might depend on how wisely we use that power going forward. What do you think? Are the mirrors of Rjukan a triumph of human spirit, or the first step down a dangerous path of environmental manipulation? Let me know in the comments. I genuinely want to hear your perspective on this one.